They buried my wife, and my daughter buried me alive. Then one dusty key made her fortune look like pocket change. My name is Isaiah Carter. I'm 68 years old, and until this spring I thought I knew what a family was. I believed love could weather mortgages and hospital bills, Sunday arguments, and Monday apologies. Denise, my wife for 43 years, believed that too. She died in March on a rainy Tuesday, her fingers light as dry leaves in my hand. 3 weeks later, I sat in a leather chair that smelled like old cigars and lemon oil, facing an oak desk in the office of attorney Malik Coleman, a heavy-set brother with tortoiseshell frames and a reputation in Atlanta's West End for making things neat. The blinds were half closed against a bright Georgia afternoon. Dust drifted steady in the light, like ash after a fire. Aaliyah, our only child, was at my left, legs crossed, a new black pantsuit shimmering when she shifted. I hadn't seen that suit before. She tapped her manicured nail against her phone screen the whole time, quiet but busy, like a drummer keeping time for news she'd already heard. "All right, Mr. Carter," Coleman said, flipping to the page he'd already dog-eared. "This is the last will and testament of Mrs. Denise Carter." His glasses slid down, and he pushed them up with the meat of his finger. "I'll read the dispositive provisions." I laced my hands and steadied my breath. Denise and I had built our life on Auburn Avenue piece by stubborn piece. A little brick bungalow with a pecan tree that had known my father. A joint savings we never touched unless the roof leaked. Her teacher's pension. My union retirement from the bus depot. We talked about splitting things fair. I figured whatever wasn't joint would default to me. That's how it usually goes when folks live clean and long. "To my loving husband Isaiah," Coleman read, "I bequeath the cabin on Sweet Gum Road in Pine Hollow and all its contents." I blinked. The cabin. My daddy's daddy built that shack with scrap lumber a century back. It leaned toward the pines like it was tired of standing. Years ago, Denise insisted we keep it for sentimental value, but we never went there, not once. It didn't have electricity far as I remembered, and if it did, the raccoons had claimed it. "To my daughter Aaliyah," Coleman continued, "I bequeath our family residence on Auburn Avenue, all bank accounts, all investments, and the sum of $6 million held in trust." The room quieted until I could hear the second hand crawling around Malik's wall clock. I stared at the paper. $6 million? Denise and I counted our pennies. We didn't have that kind of money. Coleman, reading my face, tapped the binder. "Mrs. Carter inherited her Aunt Bertie's portfolio last year," he said softly. "Tech stocks. They did very well." Aaliyah stopped tapping her phone and smiled without showing teeth. "There must be a mix-up," I said, though my voice came out smaller than I liked. Denise and I discussed. "There's no error, Daddy," Aaliyah said, turning to me with that careful patience she reserved for clients. Mama knew what she was doing. Coleman glanced between us with courtroom compassion. "The documents are clear, Mr. Carter." Mrs. Carter expressed these wishes on multiple occasions. We left without shaking hands. Outside, the sky looked too blue for what I felt. Aaliyah drove. I watched the neighborhoods blur, Edgewood, then Inman Park, then back to Auburn Avenue. Every block a history of U.S. Saturday car washes for the band, Denise packing coolers for field trips, my oil-stained coveralls draped over that porch rail like a flag. The pecan tree threw good shade across the yard. The screen door squeaked the same squeak it always had. That night I fried catfish out of muscle memory and set 2 plates on the table before I remembered to take one back. Aaliyah ate while scrolling. Around the second piece, she put her phone down. "We need to talk living arrangements," she said. "What arrangements?" I asked, though I knew. When a person starts a sentence with "we need to talk," it ain't never we. "This is my house now," she said, not unkind but firm, like she was reading a rule no one wrote but everybody follows. "I think it's healthy for you to have your own space. The cabin, it's yours." "The cabin doesn't have running water," I said. "Last time I checked, the porch steps were a rumor." She shrugged. "It's quiet out there. Peaceful. You always said you wanted time to think." She took a sip of sweet tea and added, almost as an afterthought, "I'll give you a week to pack up." A week. The word landed like a brick in my chest. "This is the home your mama and I made," I said. "We planted that hydrangea bush together. We painted these walls the week you started kindergarten. I scraped that floor with my bare hands when the varnish bubbled." Aaliyah looked at the floor I'd scraped and nodded as if appreciating a stranger's craftsmanship. "It's still mine," she said softly. "Mama left it to me. And the bank accounts are tied up with property taxes. HOA nonsense. I can't carry both places, and your upkeep on top of it, Daddy. You know how it is." "Upkeep," I repeated, like I was learning a new language where love sounded like finance. She stood, smoothed that new suit. "Please don't make this harder," she said. At the door she paused, glanced back, and tossed a line that would echo in my ears long after. "You can go live with the Hogs, old broke man." She smiled like it was a joke, but her eyes were steady. Then she was gone, her taillights a red thread unspooling into the night. I packed a life into 2 suitcases, a shoebox of photographs, Denise's choir program from a year she led the Easter cantata, my church suit, a battered King James, 3 work shirts too soft to throw away. Every time I reached for something that looked like value, a set of silver Denise's Aunt Bertie had given her, the quilt my mama made from my daddy's shirts. Aaliyah stiffened, arms crossed. "That stays," she'd say. It came with the house. The morning I left, the pecan tree dropped 3 nuts on the walkway like punctuation. I loaded my things into my old Ford, said a prayer at the top step, and drove out of the city toward Pine Hollow. The highway thinned into 2 lanes into a cracked blacktop ribbiting with frogs, then a dirt road with a green sign that read Sweet Gum Road like a dare. The cabin looked exactly like defeat. Paint curled from the wood like peeling sunburn, windows filmed over with pollen and time. The porch sagged in the middle as if it were tired of carrying people. The place smelled like mice and damp wood and old news. I set my bags down, opened every shutter that would open, and let the May air roll in, warm and thick with pine. The first night I lay on my back on an army blanket and watched stars prick the roof where shingles used to be. Grief doesn't cry. Grief hums, low, mean, endless. I hummed with it until I slept. Days blurred. Without electricity, I worked by sunlight, then by candlelight that made every chore look older than me. I hauled water from a shallow, well half a mile off, the yoke pinching my shoulders like a scolding. I hammered porch boards into something that would carry me. My hands, soft from retirement, remembered how to harden. Blisters broke and healed. Coffee boiled in a dented pot on a little propane burner, tasting like honesty and smoke. At night the wood sighed and clicked, and sometimes a hog snorted in the brush like a punchline to Aaliyah's words. The phone call started. My sister, Patrice, voice cautious. "Lily says you cussed that lawyer out, Zay. Said they had to pull you off him." "That girl's mouth," I said, tired to the marrow. "You know I didn't." Then my cousin Darlene. "Lily says you've been harassing her for cash, threatening to sue over the will." "I ain't called that child for a dime," I said, staring at my raw hands. They each wrapped their judgment in concern like meat in wax paper. I hung up and let the cabin hold the silence. A week later, a cherry-red Mercedes slid down Sweet Gum like a smear of lipstick. Aaliyah stepped out in sunglasses big as teacups, a white blazer bright as scorn. "Daddy," she sang through the busted screen, fanning herself, "just checking you're adjusting." "To what?" I asked. "Poverty," she laughed, a light little trill that didn't reach the eyes Denise had given her. "Oh, this place is rustic," she said. She pointed with her chin toward the leaning porch. "Those steps are a hazard. Maybe you should, I don't know, sell the wood for firewood." She caught her reflection in the glass and fixed her hair with 2 fingers. "Also, don't try anything foolish with Mama's will. Malik's airtight. You'd lose whatever pride you've got left." She left in a halo of dust. I stood in it until it settled into my clothes like another kind of dirt. On the 10th morning, I decided to sweep the place instead of my thoughts. I pulled up a couple of soft boards near the threshold. They'd been sprung since the Eisenhower administration, and found a nest of acorn shells and a single odd glint. At first I thought some child had slipped a toy between the joists decades ago. I knelt and pinched it free. It was a key. Not a house key. Not the kind you cut at Ace Hardware. This one was heavy as a lie. Its bow etched with tiny shapes that looked like vines or letters, but not letters I knew. The shaft bore a notch pattern too delicate for any lock I'd laid hands on in my life. It felt expensive. It felt old. It felt personal. On one side of the bow, where the metal had been polished by other thumbs long before mine, 3 letters were scratched so faint you had to tilt it into the light to coax them out. DC plus IC, Denise Carter and Isaiah Carter. Our initials. Not carved by a jeweler, scratched, careful but human. My throat tightened and I sat right down on the floor, dust bloom rising. That key cradled in my palm like a baby bird. I looked around the cabin like it was a stranger I'd misjudged. If there was a key, there had to be a lock. If there was a lock, there had to be a reason. Denise had left me this place in a world where she left Aaliyah $6 million and a house with the perfect hydrangea. Had she known what she was doing? My mind wanted to run wild, but old men learned the cost of running. I breathed. I stood. I fetched my reader glasses and wiped them on the tail of my shirt. I went room by room, pressing my palm to panels, rapping boards for hollows, peering into the warped mirror as if the secret might be written backwards across my face. Nothing gave. I stepped outside into the dry hum of cicadas and studied the stone foundation, the little stoop, the crawl-space door with its rusted hook. That hook wasn't the kind of lock that would flirt with such a beautiful key. I laughed softly despite everything. How many times had I sat in our city house while Denise hid birthday gifts in plain sight, grinning because I'd walked past them 20 times without seeing? She used to say, "Zay, the difference between a puzzle and a problem is how you look at it." Inside again, I pulled the ragged rug in the front room and found the trapdoor I remembered only as a rumor from childhood visits. A square of planks framed by a darker halo. The ring pull was missing, but there was a hole where one had been. The edges were smooth from hands that weren't mine. I slid my fingers in, lifted, and coughed when the dust jumped up like it had been waiting all this time. Stairs, narrow, mean, pitching down into cool breath that smelled like stone. I stood at the top for a count of 10, hearing nothing but my heart. I struck a match and watched the flame lick the shadows, light a little, complain a lot, then die. I picked up my lantern, the one I'd bought at the bait shop in Pine Hollow with my last 20, before I remembered pride can't boil water, and thumbed it alive. Light pushed back the dark just enough. At the bottom, dirt floor, fieldstone walls, spiderwebs fat as hammocks, and there, in the far corner, almost shy behind an old shelving unit, I saw a small metal door set into the rock. Not a safe like the movies, not grand. A panel, waist-high, with a keyhole whose shape looked like it had been designed by the hand that made my key. I ran my thumb over the initials one more time. "All right, Neasy," I said to the quiet. "Let's see what you left an old broke man." I didn't feel angry then. I didn't feel poor. I felt ready. I slid the key in and felt a neat little click. The kind of click that tells you a man with patience made both parts and meant for them to meet again. The panel door gave some, then stuck like old pride. I leaned my shoulder into it and the rust sighed and let go. A cool draft rolled out across my face, dry mineral, like the breath of a well. I lifted the lantern and saw a shallow recess, maybe 2 feet deep. Inside, a thick manila envelope, the edges gone soft with years, and a small metal cash box painted a tired gray. I took both upstairs, set them on the rough kitchen table, and just stood there a minute, hands on either side like I was bracing against a wave. I thought of Denise's bracelets clinking while she graded papers, the way she would hum blessed assurance when she signed a form that mattered. I thought of Aaliyah's new smile in Malik's office, polite as a doorman. Then I slid my thumbnail beneath the flap. Inside the envelope were documents, old ones tied with cotton string, newer ones clipped tight with a binder clip. Titles crowded the headers: warranty deed, mineral rights conveyance, topographical survey, geophysical report. The oldest papers wore the 1920s like a scent, typed letters and looping fountain pen signatures from names I only knew the way children know their great-grandparents, through stories and a black and white picture in an oval frame. One line reached up and grabbed me. all subsurface mineral rights associated with Tracts AD, totaling approximately 200.4 acres in Pine Hollow Township, remain with the Carter family and their direct designees in perpetuity. 200 acres, not the scrubby lot wrapped around the cabin. 200 acres, threading out under hills I'd been cussing for their mud. The newer bundle had a different weight. A recent county seal, a Georgia state stamp, a geological consultant's letter with a date from just 2 years ago, addressed to Mrs. Denise Carter, recommending no sale at current offer, potential upside significant. I turned another page and found color maps, little heat blossoms where instruments had sung about what lay underfoot, quartz veins thick and clean, ribbons of purple flagged amethyst indications, a note in the margin with a squiggle arrow, possible tourmaline green. Verify. There was also a letter on slick paper from a mining company up in North Carolina, all conservative font and friendly menace, offering to purchase the rights for an amount that made my pulse stutter, for $0.8 million, with a line about good faith evaluation given limited exploratory access. Paper whispered under my fingers. I opened the gray cash box with the same key, because Denise would have made it neat, and there it was, a white envelope with my name on it in her careful hand. Isaiah, in blue ink that hadn't faded a bit. I sat down before my knees reminded me who I was. My love, the letter began, and I had to stop and stare at the ceiling until the wet cleared. If you are reading this, it means you found what I tucked away and kept safe even for myself. You know how I am. If I look at something too beautiful too long, I'll be tempted to spend it. So I made it hard to look at. I smiled at that. Denise always told on herself in order to keep other folks honest. I kept reading. I left Aaliyah the house and the money because I know our girl. We gave her too much ease and not enough waiting. You and I made her soft where she needed to be strong and proud where she needed to be patient. She is quick and brilliant, but quick and brilliant can run a family off a cliff if it never learns to stop at a sign. If I had left this, the real this, to her, she'd have sold it in a hurry for the first shiny number, and then spent it teaching the world she was right to go fast. The lamp hissed. Outside, a bird fussed in the brush. Denise's script kept dancing. I left you the cabin and its contents because you know work, and you know silence, and you know how to hear the voice that doesn't shout. You would not rush this. I am sorry for the humiliation. I asked Malik to put it that way to protect the quiet until you could reach it. I hate the thought of you sleeping on a floor where the stars are the roof, but I trust you to make a bed out of anything and stand up in the morning anyway. In the back of this box you will find a number, a safe deposit box at Black Magnolia Bank in Pine Hollow. The key to that is taped beneath the box itself. Inside the deposit box are copies of everything in case these papers mold, and letters from 3 companies who smelled what the earth is holding for us. Do not take the first offer. Get an independent assessment. Keep the mineral rights if you can, and negotiate royalties if you can't. If you don't like the men they send to talk to you, send them away. You owe no one an explanation. I trust you to decide what kind of freedom money can buy. I turned the page and found one last paragraph, the kind Denise would write with her chin up, just a little. And Isaiah, when Aaliyah comes to you, because she will, and not for the reason she thinks, listen with the ears you had when you courted me. Hear what she is not saying. The scared little girl who wants so badly to be right that she will do anything to look like it. Help her if you can, but not if it costs you. Love is not always agreeing. Sometimes it is building a fence and handing somebody the gate when they have learned how to open it. At the bottom, she had drawn a tiny pecan leaf, like the one that used to fall into her hair while she read on our porch swing. I pressed that letter to my mouth and sat there until the lantern guttered once, twice, stilled. Then I set things in motion. I peeled the tape from the underside of the box and freed a little brass key that could have passed for jewelry. I put it in my pocket, along with Denise's letter and the newest of the reports. I locked the cabin, though anybody with a mind to get in could do it with a hard look, and drove the Ford into Pine Hollow. Black Magnolia Bank was the kind of place that tried to smell like coffee and money at the same time. Wainscoting, a bowl of peppermints, a receptionist with nails that matched her lipstick. I gave my name to a young man with a fade sharp enough to slice bread, and he led me to a private room with 2 chairs and a table. The box slid into the slot like a drawer in a dollhouse. Inside were, as Denise promised, organized copies of the cabin stash and a few additions. The first was a recent geological confirmation from a Dr. Harold Whitaker, UGA, Department of Geology, who'd done a private survey for Denise on the quiet. His words were cautious but kind to my prospects. Significant quartz presence, with gem-grade amethyst likely. Preliminary indicators of elbowite, tourmaline, warrant deeper trenches. Conservative valuation of rights suggests 8-figure range, depending on market conditions. 8 figures. I ran my thumb over those 2 words until the ink might as well have been Braille. There were also 3 letters on letterhead from different outfits. Piedmont Gem and Quarry out of Asheville, Magnolia Ridge Minerals from Birmingham, and an outfit with a name that sounded like a trust fund, Eastfield Resource Partners, out of Charlotte. Each one expressed sustained interest in a purchase or joint venture. Each letter wore a tone like a salesman in church, greedy, but on its best behavior. Denise had included something else, a business card for Peterson and Lowe, counselors at law, land and mineral rights, with a note in blue pen. Ask for Mr. Peterson. Met him at Choir Retreat, long story. He knows the hymnals and the statutes. I checked the date on the card. It wasn't old. I put it in my pocket to keep the key company. On the way back to the cabin, I noticed more than trees. I saw slope and drainage. I saw where quartz pebbles winked in the roadbed like teeth. I saw the lay of the valley the way a butcher sees a cow, where the cuts would be. At a high point on Sweet Gum, I pulled over and killed the engine. Pines whispered. Far off, a tractor coughed. The ground under my boots felt like it was listening to me. Or maybe I was finally listening to it. At the cabin, I spread the papers along the table by age. The old grants at the left, the modern science at the right, the offers and lawyerly options in between like stepping stones. I made coffee, the real kind that bites back, and read every page out loud, because the ear catches foolishness the eye forgives. I wrote down a plan, not fancy, just a numbered list in a church bulletin margin. Call Mr. Peterson. Ask questions until I run out of breath. Retain independent geologist, someone not on any of these companies' payrolls. Keep my mouth closed. The woods keep secrets because they never gossip. Do nothing fast. Near dark, a pickup slowed at my mailbox and a man leaned out to stuff something in. I recognized him, Mr. Henderson, whose property hugged the back edge of mine. He lifted a hand. I lifted one back. After he pulled away, I checked the box. A flyer. Pine Hollow Fall Festival Committee meeting, volunteers needed. A little note in pencil at the bottom in an old man's careful script. Glad you back, Zay. Folks forget, the ground remembers. I sat on the stoop with Denise's letter folded in my shirt pocket and the key around my neck on a piece of twine. The hogs grunted somewhere beyond the tree line. I could smell rain far off, a different county coming to visit. I wasn't rich. I wasn't safe. But I was something I hadn't been since the hospital room went quiet. I was ready to choose. The next morning broke gray and slow, like it had been thinking too hard about the night. A low fog drifted through the pines around the cabin, thick enough to swallow the porch rails. The air smelled like wet earth, and something sharp underneath, metallic, maybe, like rain hitting iron. I made my coffee the way Denise liked it, black and bitter, and stood at the window watching the mist settle over Sweet Gum Road. I had a plan now. That meant I had something to lose. After breakfast, I dialed the number on Peterson's card. A woman answered, her voice brisk but not unkind. Peterson and Lowe, she said. How may I direct your call? Yes, ma'am. My name's Isaiah Carter. I was told to ask for Mr. Peterson about mineral rights. One moment, Mr. Carter. A click, a pause, and then another voice came on, gravelly and steady like someone who had seen a lot of fools try their luck and had forgiven most of them. This is James Peterson. Mr. Peterson, my wife. Well, she passed a few months back. Left me some documents concerning mineral rights on land out here in Pine Hollow. She said you'd know what to make of them. He let out a small hum, the kind lawyers use when they're buying time to think. Ah, Mrs. Denise Carter. he said finally. Yes, I recall her. Smart woman. Had a head for long games. You say you found the paperwork. I did, I said. And I'd like to know what it all means before some company tries to pull a fast one. You're wise to come first, he said. Folks will smile at you while they dig under your feet. Why don't you bring those documents to my office? We're in Macon, about an hour and a half from you. You can find us right off Cotton Avenue. I'll be there this afternoon, I said, and he chuckled. That's the kind of energy I like. See you soon, Mr. Carter. I hung up and folded the papers back into the envelope, careful as though they might break. Before I left, I walked out to the back edge of the property, where the ground sloped into a narrow creek bed. The soil there was a strange red-brown, flecked with glittering chips of quartz. When the sun slipped through the fog, those chips caught light like tiny mirrors. I knelt and ran a handful through my fingers, the grains cold and fine, sliding like secrets. Denise, I thought, what did you find out here? By noon I was on Highway 23, the Ford groaning but faithful. The landscape rolled by in shades of gold and pine. The radio only caught gospel and talk shows, but that was all right. Both knew how to keep a man company. Peterson's office sat above a corner cafe that smelled like buttered biscuits. Inside, it was all dark wood, the kind of place that made you whisper even if no one asked you to. Peterson himself stood when I came in, a tall man, silver hair, tense suit, eyes sharp but tired. Mr. Carter, he said, shaking my hand firmly. I'm sorry for your loss. Your wife spoke highly of you. I didn't know what to say to that, so I nodded. She was the best of us. I managed. He gestured to a chair. Let's see what she left you. For the next hour, he read. He flipped through pages, scribbled notes, adjusted his glasses, and occasionally muttered a quiet, well, I'll be damned, under his breath. I sat still, listening to the clock tick, until he finally leaned back and folded his hands. Mr. Carter, he said, I hope you're sitting on something sturdy, because your wife just handed you a gold mine. Maybe literally. I blinked. Come again. These rights are clean, he said. Uncontested, never sold, never leased. Every signature checks out. She, or her family rather, retained mineral rights over 200 acres. The recent surveys confirm gemstone potential, and not the cheap kind either. The quartz and amethyst alone could net millions, and that's before we even talk about the tourmaline veins. Tourmaline? I asked, tasting the word like a foreign name. He smiled. Colored gemstone, high value in jewelry markets. Green varieties rare around here. If those readings are accurate, you're sitting on a resource most mining companies would kill to control. I leaned back, my pulse loud in my ears. And you're sure this can't be challenged? My daughter, she inherited everything else. Peterson shook his head. No challenge will stand. The rights are separate from the surface estate. Mrs. Carter filed the deed correctly and titled it in your name only. Your daughter's claim begins and ends with the house and liquid assets. These minerals, they're yours alone. I let out a slow breath I didn't know I'd been holding. So what do I do now? He steepled his fingers. Patience, Mr. Carter. That's your weapon. We'll get an independent geologist, someone I trust, to conduct a full assessment. No rush. Once we know the exact valuation, you can decide. Sell the rights outright, lease them, or form a partnership for royalties. But whatever you do, don't sign anything until I've seen it. I nodded. That's fair. And one more thing, he said, lowering his voice. If word gets out, people will come sniffing around, company men, investors, maybe even family. Keep quiet until we've got facts. I can manage that, I said. He smiled faintly. I imagine you can. By the time I stepped outside, the afternoon sun had burned the fog away. The cafe downstairs was closing, so I grabbed a biscuit for the road and started back to Pine Hollow. Every mile felt different now, each hill, each creek, each quiet stretch of land. The same dirt I'd cursed for swallowing my boots might now hold a fortune. When I reached the cabin, the shadows were long and gold. I parked by the porch and sat a minute, engine ticking, thinking of Denise's letter. She trusted me to find this. She trusted me to be patient. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and candle wax. I placed the documents back in the drawer beneath the table, locking it with the little key from the safe box. Then I poured a finger of bourbon into an old jelly jar and stepped outside to the porch. The woods were whispering again. Somewhere in the distance, a whippoorwill called, lonely but alive. I raised the glass toward the sound. "To you, Neezy," I said softly. "You knew I'd need something to dig for." I slept better that night than I had in months. Over the next few days, life found a rhythm again. I woke with the sun, cooked on the little propane stove, fixed what needed fixing. Mr. Peterson called midweek to tell me he'd reached the geologist, Dr. Martin Reeves, an independent consultant from Savannah. "He's a good man," Peterson said. "No corporate strings. He'll drive up Friday to start surveying your land." "Appreciate it," I said. Friday morning came bright and dry. Dr. Reeves arrived in a dusty SUV with university stickers on the bumper and boots that had seen more rocks than pavement. He was in his 50s, thin and wiry, beard silvering around the edges. He introduced himself with a handshake that felt like old rope. "Mr. Carter," he said cheerfully. "Heard you've got a mystery hill out here. Let's go see what kind of bones the earth's hiding." We spent the day walking the property. He carried a pack full of odd equipment, meters, drills, sample bags, and a handheld scanner that beeped occasionally like it was gossiping with the dirt. I followed, watching him mark points with little orange flags. Every so often he'd whistle low and say, "That's interesting." By late afternoon, sweat darkened his shirt and red clay streaked his jeans. He crouched by a creek and broke a stone open with his hammer, holding it up to the sun. Inside, tiny purple crystals winked back. "Well, I'll be," he murmured. "Gem-grade amethyst. Clean, too. You weren't kidding, Mr. Carter. This land's holding secrets." "What's that mean in English?" I asked. He smiled, slipping the fragment into a bag. "It means, sir, you may want to start thinking like a man with options." That night, after he left, I sat at the kitchen table turning the stone fragment over in my hand. The light from my lantern caught on its surface, throwing a violet glimmer across the wall. It looked like a piece of night caught in daylight, something fragile but unbreakable. Aaliyah had taken my home and my name for granted. She thought she'd buried me in dust. But dust, I realized, is just earth waiting to shine. And Denise, Lord, that woman, had known it all along. Dr. Reeves came back 2 days later with a cooler full of labeled samples and a grin that said he'd found more than he'd expected. He'd promised to email a full report, but he couldn't help himself. Scientists, I've learned, are preachers with better grammar. "Mr. Carter," he said, wiping his brow with a bandana, "I've seen a lot of ground in Georgia, but this is special. You've got quartz veins running like train tracks under your property. The amethyst alone could fund a small company. And that's not the end of it." "What else?" I asked, trying to sound calm though my heart was hammering like a gospel drum. "Green tourmaline," he said, elbowite to be precise. "Gem quality from the samples I took. You're sitting on a geological time capsule. If the estimates hold, you're talking anywhere from $10 to $15 million in raw value. Maybe more, depending on extraction efficiency." He said it like he was discussing the weather. I sat down on the porch step before my knees gave way. "Dr. Reeves," I said slowly, "you telling me that red clay out there is worth more than the house my daughter threw me out of?" He smiled kindly. "Sir, I'm saying the ground your boots are on is the kind of inheritance people dream about." He left shortly after, promising to send the finalized report to both me and Mr. Peterson. When his truck disappeared down the road, the forest fell silent again. I sat on that porch for a long time, watching sunlight spill across the yard like honey and thinking about Denise's handwriting. "Keep quiet until you can see the shape of the blessing." That afternoon, the phone rang, an old rotary I'd found in a box in the cabin. I picked it up, expecting Peterson. It was Aaliyah. "Daddy," she said, her voice smooth but brittle. "I heard from Aunt Patrice you've been keeping busy out there." "Busy how?" I asked, though my pulse quickened. "Oh, you know how small towns are," she said. "People talk. Something about a man from Savannah digging around your property. Geological surveys. She let the words hang like bait. I took my time answering, just fixing the land up, checking foundations. MHM, she said, and I could picture her smile, the one that never reached her eyes. I hope you're not getting mixed up in anything risky. Those mining companies scam old folks all the time. I could help you look over any contracts, make sure you're protected. There it was, the lawyer voice, honeyed and sharp. I appreciate the offer, Lily, I said evenly, but I can handle myself. She sighed, the kind of sigh meant to sound caring but full of disappointment. Daddy, you've never dealt with this kind of money. If someone's dangling promises, I cut her off gently. The only promise I'm worried about is the one your mama made me keep. A silence followed, long enough for me to hear her breathing change. Mama, she said finally, her tone flat. Always, Mama. Always, I said. She hung up first. The next few days were a blur of motion. Peterson confirmed Reeves' findings and started handling inquiries from interested companies. The first offer came in under 2 weeks, $9 million for full rights, no royalties. Peterson told me to laugh and hang up. The second offer came from a company in Charlotte, promising $12 million and a small ongoing percentage. Better, he said, but still lowballing. We met twice more in his office, combing through every clause and comma. I learned words I'd never thought I'd use: royalty override, extraction lease, environmental bond. I learned patience, too. Denise's voice echoed in my mind with every contract I declined. Don't rush the blessing. Meanwhile, I kept the cabin looking just as broken down as before. From the road, it still looked like a forgotten relic, a place for raccoons, not riches. I even left the porch boards uneven, so that anyone snooping would think an old man was barely hanging on. But inside, things had changed. I'd installed solar panels on the roof, small, quiet ones, and a proper well pump out back. I could cook with real light now, heat water, and play my old records. At night, the sound of Sam Cooke filled the cabin, and for the first time since Denise's funeral, I danced a little, slow and clumsy, but alive. One evening while I was sanding a new table, headlights appeared on the dirt road. My stomach dropped. No one visited out here unannounced. The car stopped, a black Lexus, dust covered from the drive. Aaliyah stepped out. She wore jeans and sneakers, casual enough to look harmless, but her posture still carried the city in it. Straight spine, chin high, eyes alert. Daddy, she called, her voice carrying through the dusk. You didn't answer my texts. Didn't have much to say, I said, wiping sawdust off my hands. She walked closer, looking around with mild disgust. You've made improvements, she said. Solar panels, really? That's ambitious. Helps keep the lights on, I said. Must have cost a pretty penny, she said, eyes narrowing. You sure you're not in over your head? I'm fine. She studied me for a moment, then sighed dramatically. Look, Daddy, I know I haven't been fair. Things got messy after Mama passed. But if you've come into some kind of opportunity, we should talk about managing it properly. Together. I almost laughed. We. Yes, she said. You and me. Family. You shouldn't have to handle this alone at your age. I could help negotiate. I'm a lawyer, remember? You mean like how you helped me move out in a week? Her jaw tightened. That was different. You know Mama. Your mama left us both tests, I said quietly. Yours was money you could lose. Mine was land I had to find. What's that supposed to mean? Means you got what you wanted, and I got what I needed. She frowned, then forced a smile. You're being cryptic, Daddy. That's not like you. I shrugged. Maybe I learned it from Mama. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The woods hummed, cicadas sawing the evening apart. Finally, she said, if you ever change your mind, I can still help. You know my door is always open. Funny, I said. I remember you closing it. Her eyes flashed, hurt, maybe anger, but she swallowed it. Good night, Daddy, she said finally, and walked back to her Lexus. I watched her taillights fade down Sweetgum Road, thinking of how much of Denise lived in that girl, her pride, her drive, her stubbornness, and how little of her heart she'd kept. That night, I sat at my desk and opened Denise's letter again. When Aaliyah comes to you, hear what she's not saying. She hadn't come for forgiveness. She'd come for a piece of something she didn't understand yet. By the end of the month, Peterson called with news. We've got the offer you've been waiting for, Mr. Carter. Magnolia Ridge Minerals, $12 million up front, plus 12% royalties on future extraction. They'll fund the environmental protections themselves. It's clean. I'd take it. I didn't answer right away. And Denise's share in that? I asked softly. She's already taken care of her share, Mr. Carter, he said kindly. Now it's your turn. I looked out the window at the dark line of the trees. Somewhere under that soil, Denise had hidden not just wealth, but a lesson for me, for Aaliyah, maybe for both of us. All right, Mr. Peterson, I said. Let's do it. But take your time with the paperwork. I'm in no rush. He chuckled. That's exactly what your wife said the first time I met her. After we hung up, I walked out to the porch. The air was cool and alive, filled with the smell of pine and promise. Somewhere out there, the ground was shining in the dark, waiting to be unearthed. And this time, I wasn't the one buried. The contract was signed 3 weeks later in Peterson's office, quietly, carefully, without fanfare. I wore the same dark suit I'd buried Denise in, pressed and mended, and polished my shoes until I could see the ghost of my own grin. The Magnolia Ridge executives arrived in matching gray jackets, smooth voices, and practiced smiles. One of them, a woman named Miss Clark, shook my hand with both of hers like she was sealing a prayer. Mr. Carter, she said, your wife must have been a remarkable woman. She kept these rights locked away for decades. Most folks would have sold at the first offer. I smiled faintly. Denise believed in timing, I said. The papers were thick enough to stop a bullet. Peterson guided me through every page, pointing out the places to initial and the clauses that mattered. Royalty percentages, extraction caps, environmental oversight. For every $1 million promise, there was a paragraph about liability or reclamation. When it was over, Miss Clark extended her hand again. Congratulations, sir. Magnolia Ridge is honored to partner with you. Just take care of the land, I told her. It's older than all of us. She nodded, her smile softening. We will. You have my word. The funds hit my account 2 days later. $12 million. Wire transfer confirmed. I stared at the number on the bank statement like it was a foreign language. Me, a man who'd spent half his life counting overtime hours and clipping coupons, now had more money than I could ever spend. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell a soul, not even Peterson. I drove straight back to Pine Hollow and sat on the porch until the moon rose. The pines swayed in the dark, like they knew something had changed. Denise, I thought we did it. In the following weeks, the company moved in equipment, surveyed drones, soil testers, portable offices. They operated quietly, far enough from the cabin that I could pretend life hadn't shifted. Every morning, trucks rumbled down Sweet Gum Road, and every evening they rumbled back out, headlights cutting through the dusk. The crew respected the property line. They waved when they saw me, called me Mr. Carter, and never lingered. I stayed out of their way. My days had their rhythm again. Coffee at sunrise, work around the cabin, reading in the afternoons. Sometimes I'd walk the ridges and watch where they dug. It didn't look like greed yet, just men and women doing a job, listening to the hum of machines. 2 weeks into the operation, Peterson called to confirm the first royalty deposit, $140,000. It hit like a quiet thunderclap. That was more than my pension for 5 years. And still, I kept the secret. Aaliyah, meanwhile, had gone silent since her visit. I'd half expected her to show up again, maybe with apologies rehearsed in her mirror. Instead, she vanished back into her Atlanta world. The quiet suited me fine, until one humid Saturday when my neighbor, Mr. Henderson, knocked on my door. "Zay," he said, holding a folded newspaper. "You seen this?" He handed me the Atlanta Courier, the kind of paper I never bought. There, in the business section, was an article titled "Magnolia Ridge Expands Georgia Operations After Landmark Deal." A grainy photo of the company's site showed the outline of my land, and in the second paragraph, my name. Isaiah Carter, Pine Hollow resident, retains minority ownership in Mineral Rights Partnership. My stomach turned. Thought you might want to know before the whole county does, Henderson said quietly. Congratulations, though. You finally caught a good break. Yeah, I said, though the word tasted wrong. After he left, I sat on the porch staring at the trees, my piece cracking open like old wood. I could already see the ripples coming. That evening, right on cue, the Lexus returned. Aaliyah stepped out before the engine stopped. She wore a simple dress this time, no jewelry, but her eyes burned with the kind of curiosity that could light a forest. So, she said, holding the newspaper, you weren't just fixing the foundation. I didn't answer. Magnolia Ridge, she continued, waving the article. Royalty partnership. Minority ownership. Daddy, why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't your business. Her mouth fell open, then snapped shut. You think this doesn't concern me? I'm your daughter. I should have been part of this conversation. Like I was part of Mama's will. That's different. Is it? I asked. Because it feels like the same language, just different people reading it. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Look, I get it. You're hurt, but you need guidance. This is real money. Companies like that, they'll drain you dry if you're not careful. I can protect you. I met her gaze, steady. You couldn't protect your own $6 million. That stopped her cold. I stood and pointed toward the hills, where the machines glinted in the distance. You see that? That's what your mama left for me. Not money, patience. Work. Faith that something small could become something mighty if you didn't rush it. You were given everything ready-made, and you burned through it trying to prove you didn't need help. Don't come out here trying to save me now. She looked down, blinking fast, her voice trembling. Daddy, I didn't. I thought I was doing what Mama wanted. I know you did, I said softly. But Mama wanted us both to learn different lessons. You just haven't finished yours yet. She opened her mouth to argue, then shut it again. So that's it. You're just gonna freeze me out. I'm gonna live my life, I said, and you're gonna live yours. Maybe one day they'll meet again. She stared at me for a long time, her eyes glossy in the fading light. Then she said, Mama would have been proud of you, you know. I smiled sadly. Maybe now you believe why she trusted me with the cabin. She nodded, wiped a tear, and turned back to her car. For a while, the silence between us felt cleaner than the words ever had. Over the next few months, the mine expanded carefully. The engineers built a small processing facility down by the creek, surrounded by containment fencing and floodlights. I kept a respectful distance, but once a week the site manager, a tall woman named Yvette, stopped by the cabin to update me. We're keeping operations low impact, she said one afternoon, showing me reports. No groundwater contamination, no clear cutting. Your wife must have known how to pick land. She left you a gem in more ways than one. I smiled. She always did have good taste. By winter, the royalties had grown to nearly $500,000. Peterson structured everything cleanly. Trust accounts, diversified investments, taxes paid on time. My lawyer called it strategic wealth management. I called it breathing room. Still, I didn't change much. The cabin got new plumbing, insulation, a paint job that made it look less like a ruin. I bought a new truck, reliable but modest. The locals still thought I was scraping by, and I let them. Money, I'd learned, shines loudest when it's silent. But peace never lasts long when envy's in the blood. One cold January evening, while I was sipping coffee by the fire, a knock rattled the door. I opened it to find Aaliyah again, but this time, she looked different. Her coat was frayed at the cuffs, her makeup gone. She carried a small purse and the weight of the world in her eyes. Daddy, she said quietly, can I come in? Her voice was small, no pride, no lawyer's tone, just a daughter's plea. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the fire. Sit down, Lily. She sat, shivering slightly, staring at the floor. I messed up, she said finally. Bad. Investments, debt, everything. I thought I could turn Mama's inheritance into something bigger, but it's gone. The house, the accounts, even the car. They're all gone. I watched her face, the same face I'd loved since the day she was born, and felt my heart ache. Not with anger this time, but recognition. Denise had been right all along. The blessing was never about the land. It was about the breaking. "Tell me everything," I said quietly, as the fire crackled between us. And she did. Aaliyah's voice trembled as she began to talk, the words tumbling out like stones she'd been carrying too long. "After Mama died," she said, staring into the fire, "I didn't know what to do with all that money. I kept thinking, if I just made more of it, somehow it would make losing her hurt less. So I invested, real estate, crypto, stocks, whatever someone said was the next big thing. At first, it worked. I doubled a few accounts. I thought I was brilliant." I stayed quiet, letting her talk. I'd learned long ago that silence does more healing than sermons ever could. "But then," she went on, "the market turned. The people I trusted turned too. I took loans against the properties, thinking I'd bounce back. Instead, I drowned. I sold everything I could to keep up appearances. When I couldn't anymore, the bank came knocking. And then the whispers started. The same people who toasted me at fundraisers stopped taking my calls. I don't even have my law firm anymore. My partners voted me out." She buried her face in her hands. "I'm so stupid." "You're not stupid," I said quietly. "You just mistook noise for wisdom. Happens to smart folks all the time." She lifted her face, eyes red. "I said things to you, Daddy, awful things. I thought you were weak. That Mama was just being sentimental leaving you that cabin. I wanted to prove I was smarter than both of you." "And did you?" I asked softly. She shook her head. "No. I proved Mama knew exactly who I was." I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, brittle from stress. "Your Mama used to say pride is just fear wearing fancy shoes," I said. She wasn't wrong. She laughed through her tears, a small, broken sound. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Maybe not," I said. "But lucky for you, I don't hand out kindness based on merit. I hand it out the way your Mama handed out love, because it's the only way to keep it alive." She looked at me then, really looked. "I don't even have a place to stay," she whispered. "Can I stay here? Just until I figure things out." I studied her face, tired, humbled, human. The same face that had once told me to live with hogs. Denise's words from her letter came back to me. "When she comes to you, listen to what she's not saying." "You can stay," I said finally. "But there'll be rules." "Rules?" I nodded. "This ain't charity. You'll work, eat, and pray same as me. You'll help around the cabin, clean, repair, cook, haul wood, whatever needs doing. I don't need another mouth. I need another pair of hands. You do that. You've got a roof and a hot meal." Her chin trembled, but she nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll do anything." "And," I added, "you'll talk to me, not at me. Respectfully. No lawyer voice. No high ground speeches. Just my daughter, talking to her daddy. Understood?" "Yes," she said. "Understood." That night, after she went to bed on the old cot in the corner, I sat by the fire long after the logs turned to coals. The sound of her steady breathing behind the curtain brought back memories of when she was little. How she'd crawl into our bed after nightmares, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I'd forgotten that sound, forgotten how small forgiveness could start. The next morning, she woke before me, already sweeping the porch. When I came out with coffee, she looked up, startled. "Didn't want to wake you," she said. "Good instinct," I replied. We spent the day working side by side, patching a roof leak, clearing branches from the driveway, repairing the chicken coop left by some long-ago tenant. She wasn't used to manual labor, her hands blistered by noon, but she didn't complain. I admired that. When we stopped for lunch, I made cornbread and beans. She ate slowly, eyes fixed on the table. "It's been years since I ate simple food," she murmured. "Simple doesn't mean poor," I said. "It means honest." She nodded, thoughtful. Over the next weeks, the rhythm of our days found its shape. We rose with the dawn, worked until the sun climbed high, and talked in the evenings by the fire. The conversation started awkwardly, whether groceries, the mail, but they grew deeper. She began asking about Denise, about the years before she was born. I told her stories. How her mama once painted our living room lemon yellow just to make winter less gray. How she'd bake peach cobbler, but burn the edges every time. How she'd sneak out to dance barefoot in the rain. Aaliyah listened, eyes soft. I forgot she was that alive, she whispered one night. I only remember her serious. She was serious about love, I said. The rest was just seasoning. One chilly evening, she came to me while I was polishing the old Ford. Daddy, she said carefully, I want to make things right. Not just between us, financially too. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but if there's any way I can earn back what I lost. I put down the rag. You already started, baby. Every blister, every dawn you get up to work, that's earning. But you don't need to pay me back in dollars. You just need to learn what your mama tried to teach us both. How to stay rich without money. She frowned. And how do I do that? I smiled. By remembering who you are when no one's watching. The months slipped by. Winter gave way to spring. The mine's hum became part of the background, steady as a heartbeat. Magnolia Ridge kept their word. No pollution, no overreach. Royalties continued like clockwork, though I rarely check the numbers anymore. I didn't need to. Aaliyah found small joys again. She started painting on scraps of wood from our repairs, wildflowers, sunsets, even a portrait of Denise that she hung above the fireplace. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. Some evenings, she'd read aloud from her old law textbooks, laughing at how complicated people made simple truths. One afternoon, I caught her sitting under the pecan tree, sketching the mine workers' trucks as they rolled down the dirt road. She looked peaceful, the sun tangled in her curls. When she noticed me watching, she grinned shyly. Guess I'm learning patience, she said. I chuckled. Careful, that's addictive. By early summer, I noticed something else, a steadiness in her voice, a humility in her movements. The sharp edges had dulled into something stronger. She was becoming the woman Denise had always hoped she'd be. One evening after supper, as the sky bruised purple and gold, she handed me a folded envelope. I wrote something, she said. For you, for Mama, for the family. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, not long, but sincere. In it, she apologized for her cruelty, for her arrogance, for mistaking love for weakness. She thanked me for the cabin, for forgiveness, for teaching her that losing everything was the only way to find herself. When I finished reading, my throat burned. You planning to share this? I asked. She nodded. At the next family gathering. I want them to hear it. Denise's letter had told me this moment would come. Still, I wasn't prepared for how proud I felt. Then we'll do it together, I said. And for the first time in years, my daughter smiled the way she used to, as if home wasn't a place you inherit, but one you rebuild, nail by nail, heart by heart. That summer, Pine Hollow turned green and gold again, the kind of season that makes the world look freshly washed. Cicadas buzzed in the trees like they were gossiping about the heat, and the smell of honeysuckle drifted through the cracked cabin windows. Aaliyah had been living with me nearly 5 months now, and every day I saw a little more of the girl I used to know, and a little less of the woman who had thrown me out of my own house. We'd build a rhythm, quiet, steady, humble. She woke early now, sometimes before me, to gather kindling or fetch water from the well. Her hands, once manicured and soft, had grown strong and sure. She didn't flinch at hard work anymore. She welcomed it. One morning in July, I came out to find her sanding the porch rail with a look of deep concentration. Her curls stuck to her forehead with sweat. You missed a spot, I teased, pointing with my coffee mug. She laughed, wiping her brow. Perfectionist habits die hard. That's your mama in you, I said, sitting down beside her. She'd repaint a whole wall if one brushstroke bothered her. She probably would have had this place looking like a magazine cover, Aaliyah said, smiling wistfully. You ever think about rebuilding it, like really restoring it? I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. Maybe one day, but not too much. This place reminds me where I came from. Can't polish away your roots, or you forget how deep they go. She nodded. Yeah, I guess I know a little about forgetting roots. Her tone was soft, but the guilt still lingered underneath. I decided not to press it. Guilt is like a wound. It heals faster when it breathes. Later that afternoon, We drove into town for supplies. Pine Hollow was small enough that every trip turned into a social event. At the hardware store, folks nodded and waved. Word had spread that I'd made some sort of deal with a mining company, but no one knew the details, and I liked it that way. Money draws mouths, and mouths draw trouble. Still, people treated me with new respect. Not the fake kind Aaliyah used to get in Atlanta, but the kind you earn from showing up and keeping steady. Mr. Henderson clapped me on the shoulder near the nails aisle. Heard that operation of yours is hiring locals, he said. Good on you, Zay. We could use the work. I told them to, I said. This land fed us for generations. Time it gave back. That's a rare kind of thinking nowadays, he said with a grin. Your daddy'd be proud. Aaliyah watched the exchange quietly. On the drive home, she turned to me. You know, I used to think small towns were just small minds. But people here, they actually see each other. No one looks through you. That's the trick, I said. In a big city, everybody's performing. Out here, you just live. She smiled. I think I like living better. By August, she'd started visiting the mine site occasionally. Just to learn, she said. Yvette, the site manager, took a liking to her and began teaching her the basics of operations law, compliance paperwork, and contract management. It surprised me at first, seeing my daughter, who used to chase prestige, now ankle-deep in red clay with a clipboard and genuine curiosity. One evening, Yvette stopped by for a quick chat before heading home. That girl of yours is sharp, she told me, leaning against her truck. Asked questions I wish my interns knew how to ask. She's got a good head on her shoulders now. I smiled. Took her a while to find it. Maybe she just needed different soil, Yvette said, tipping her hat before driving off. That night, over dinner, Aaliyah mentioned it herself. Yvette thinks I could consult for Magnolia Ridge, help bridge legal compliance with community outreach. I raised an eyebrow. You thinking about working for them? Not exactly. More like working with them. I told her I'd only do it if it meant keeping the land healthy and making sure locals got their fair share. I studied her face. The old pride was gone. What replaced it was purpose. Denise would have smiled hearing that. Sounds like a good way to use that lawyer brain of yours, I said. She grinned. You're not going to say I told you so. I chuckled. You already know I told you so. No need to rub it in. We laughed together, real laughter, the kind that shakes loose years of pain. For the first time in a long time, the air between us felt easy. As summer waned, we started planning the family gathering. Every year since I could remember, the Carters met in early fall at Patrice's house outside Savannah, a tradition that had faded since Denise passed. This year, though, Aaliyah insisted we go. I need to do this, she said firmly. Mama deserves it. I knew what she meant, the apology letter. When the day came, we packed a truck with cornbread, baked chicken, and a framed copy of Denise's photograph from the living room. The drive to Savannah took 4 hours, the kind of ride where time stretches long enough for reflection. Aaliyah was quiet most of the way, clutching the envelope in her lap. You ready? I asked as we neared Patrice's neighborhood. She exhaled slowly. No, but I'm going anyway. When we pulled into the driveway, cousins, nieces, and nephews spilled out of the house like a flood of memories. Patrice hugged me first, her eyes shiny. Zay, you old fool, she said. We thought you'd vanished into those woods for good. Not yet, I said with a grin. Just went where the peace lives. When Aaliyah stepped out, the chatter dimmed. Everyone knew what she'd done. Family secrets travel faster than light. Some looked skeptical, others just curious. Patrice gave her a small nod of welcome. After dinner, when the laughter softened and plates were cleared, Aaliyah stood up with the letter trembling in her hands. Can I say something? She asked. The room fell quiet. She read. Her voice wavered at first, then grew stronger. She spoke about greed, about pride, about losing everything she thought mattered, until all that was left was the man she'd hurt most. She told them how I had forgiven her, not with money or pity, but with work, with faith, with love that expected her to be better. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even Patrice, who'd always had a spine of steel, dabbed her eyes with a napkin. I stood and put a hand on my daughter's shoulder. "Your mama would be proud," I said softly. Afterward, the family crowded around her, some hugging, some just nodding in quiet respect. In that moment, I realized something. Denise's plan hadn't just healed me or humbled Aaliyah. It had mended the whole family. The whispers that had once painted me as the bitter old man in the woods had turned into murmurs of respect. Later that night, as the stars draped themselves over the Savannah sky, Aaliyah and I sat on Patrice's porch, rocking gently in old chairs that creaked with history. "You think Mama knew it would come to this?" she asked. I smiled, watching fireflies blink over the yard. "Your mama didn't do anything by accident. She planted lessons like seeds. We're just late bloomers." Aaliyah laughed softly. "Guess we are." We stayed there in the quiet, the cicadas singing their endless song, and I felt Denise's presence between us, not as a ghost, but as a warmth, like the glow of a lamp left on for someone coming home. And for the first time since her funeral, I realized we finally were home. When we got back from Savannah, the air in Pine Hollow had already started to cool. The leaves were just beginning to blush amber and red, and the mornings carried that crisp edge that always reminded me of Denise's apple pies and the sound of gospel radio on Sundays. The family gathering had gone better than either of us dared to dream. Aaliyah's apology had washed away years of distance, and the calls started coming in. Cousins checking in, Patrice sending jars of peach jam, even Linda mailing old photographs I hadn't seen in decades. But it wasn't just family that had changed. Aaliyah had too. Something in her had settled, like dust after storm. She smiled more easily, listened more deeply. There was no arrogance left, only gratitude and purpose. One morning, over breakfast, she spread out papers across the table. "I've been thinking," she said, sipping coffee, "about starting a foundation, something in Mama's name, for women, especially single mothers, trying to rebuild after losing everything." I looked up from my toast. "That's a tall order." "I know," she said, her eyes bright, "but I've been volunteering with a few community groups. These women remind me of you, Daddy. Hard-working, overlooked, but strong. They just need a hand, not a handout." I smiled slowly. "Sounds like you've been listening to your mama's sermons." She laughed. Guess her words stuck after all. We spent the rest of that morning sketching out ideas, what the foundation would do, who it would serve, how we could make it sustainable. I suggested using a portion of my royalties to seed the funding. Your mama wanted her blessings to ripple. I told her, no reason they should stop with us. The following weeks were a blur of planning. We drove into Atlanta several times to meet with nonprofit advisors, lawyers, and accountants. Aaliyah had a fire in her now, but it wasn't the same kind of ambition that used to drive her. It was quieter, steadier, more rooted in something real. At one meeting, an older consultant looked over our plans and said, "You're naming this after your late wife, Mrs. Denise Carter?" "Yes," Aaliyah said proudly. "The Denise Carter Resilience Fund." The woman smiled. "That's a beautiful name. Fitting, too." When the paperwork was filed, I took Aaliyah to dinner at a small soul food restaurant near the courthouse. It wasn't fancy, plastic tablecloths, neon signs, but it was honest, just like home. As we ate, she leaned back and sighed. "You know, Daddy, if someone had told me a year ago I'd be living in a cabin, working with miners, and starting a foundation instead of shopping in Paris, I'd have called them insane." I chuckled. Maybe that's what it takes, losing your old self to find your real one. She smiled softly. "Yeah, I guess Mama knew that." After that, things moved quickly. By November, the Resilience Fund had its first office, 2 rented rooms in a restored brick building in Savannah. The mine royalties kept coming, and Peterson helped me create a trust to support the foundation indefinitely. It felt right, like turning Denise's last gift into something that would outlive us both. But blessings, I've learned, never come without a test. One afternoon, Aaliyah came home from Savannah looking troubled. She dropped her purse on the counter and sat down heavily. "Daddy, there's something you should know." "What's that?" "I got a call from Magnolia Ridge's legal department," she said. "Apparently, a shareholder, someone new, filed a motion to review the land rights. They're questioning the original mineral deed your name's on. I froze. Questioning how? They're claiming the rights might have transferred to Mama's estate before you inherited the property. If that's true, it could mean they'd have to reopen the distribution of assets from her will. And if that happens, she'd be entitled to half of what's mine. I finished for her. Aaliyah nodded. Or worse, they could try to suspend your royalties until it's resolved. I leaned back, letting the words sink in. Do you know who's behind it? She hesitated, and my gut already knew the answer before she spoke. Her name's Pamela Ross, she said quietly. She's one of the firm's new investors. But here's the thing. Pamela used to be my mentor at the law firm. She knows me. And she knows you. I frowned. You think this is personal? She nodded slowly. I think it's revenge. When I left the firm, she took it badly. Now she's using this to test me, and you. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The fire crackled, and the wind outside whistled through the pines. Finally, I said, then I guess it's time to fight smart. You still got that lawyer in you. Her eyes met mine, a flicker of the old fire returning. Always. We spent the next week knee-deep in paperwork, contracts, deeds, notarized statements. Peterson joined us, his calm voice steady through the storm. This is a nuisance claim, he said after reviewing everything. But they're hoping you'll panic and settle. If we stand firm and respond with documentation, they'll back down. And if they don't? Aaliyah asked. Then we go to court, Peterson said, and let the truth speak for itself. That night, after Peterson left, Aaliyah and I sat on the porch under a thin crescent moon. The air was cool, the kind that smells like endings and beginnings. Funny thing, she said, staring into the dark. I used to live for the courtroom. The rush, the applause, the wins. Now I just want peace. Peace don't come from running, I said. It comes from standing still long enough to face what's chasing you. She nodded. You think Mama knew we'd have to fight again? Your mama always knew the road wasn't done testing us, I said. But she also knew we'd stop running eventually. The legal battle dragged on for months. Pamela's lawyers tried every angle, questioning dates, contesting signatures, even hinting at fraud. But every document, every record, every clause came back in our favor. Denise had made sure of that long ago. At the final hearing in Savannah, I sat behind Aaliyah as she stood before the judge, her voice calm and measured. Your Honor, she said, the evidence shows my mother's estate and my father's inheritance were legally distinct. There is no overlap, no shared claim, and no grounds for interference with my father's rights. This case isn't about justice. It's about greed disguised as procedure. The courtroom fell silent. Pamela avoided Aaliyah's eyes. The judge nodded thoughtfully, then spoke. The evidence is clear. Mr. Carter retains full ownership of the mineral rights. Motion dismissed. Relief hit like a wave. Aaliyah exhaled, shoulders trembling. I reached forward and squeezed her hand. You did good, baby, I whispered. Outside, reporters waited, but we walked right past them. No statements, no pride, no gloating, just quiet victory. On the drive home, Aaliyah rolled down the window and let the wind tangle her hair. You know, she said, smiling faintly. For the first time, I think I understand why Mama did it all this way. The tests, the hardship, the separation. Why's that? Because she knew we couldn't build peace on comfort. We had to break to fit back together. I looked at her and saw the reflection of Denise in her smile. The same strength, the same grace. Then I'd say she got what she wanted. I said. That night, back in Pine Hollow, I stood under the stars, breathing the cool air, and whispered into the night. We passed the test, baby. We finally passed. And somewhere, I swear I could feel Denise smiling back. Winter settled over Pine Hollow like a quiet prayer. The mine slowed its operations for the season, the hum of machinery fading into distant echoes, and the forest returned to stillness. Frost painted the windows each morning, and wood smoke curled from the chimney like a lazy ribbon. I found myself waking earlier these days, old habits of a man who'd lived too many years watching the sun rise before worry could catch up. Aaliyah and I had grown comfortable in our new peace. The lawsuit was behind us. The Resilience Fund was running smoothly. And for the first time in years, laughter came easily in our home. She'd taken to writing articles for local papers, columns about rebuilding, humility, and second chances. People responded. Donations began trickling into the foundation, small at first, then steady. Denise's name was spreading again, not in grief this time, but in gratitude. Still, I could tell Aaliyah was restless. The cabin, for all its warmth and memory, wasn't a forever place for her. She'd been born for motion, for leadership, for building. One evening, as we sat by the fire, she spoke the thought that had been growing between us. "Daddy," she began carefully, "I've been offered something big, a chance to expand the foundation. The city council in Savannah wants me to partner with them, create a rehabilitation program for women re-entering the workforce. It would mean moving there full-time." I nodded slowly, the firelight flickering against her hopeful eyes. "That's good, Lily. That's real good." She hesitated. "I don't want to leave you here alone." I smiled. "Girl, I was alone before you were born. Don't mistake solitude for loneliness. This land keeps me company better than most folks ever could." She laughed softly but looked uncertain. "You sure? I could set up a caretaker, or—" I raised a hand. "Stop right there. You've got work to do, and it ain't here. The world's waiting for what you've become. Don't clip your wings now that you've finally learned how to fly." Her eyes softened, glistening. "You always know what to say." I shrugged. Old men get wise when they run out of dumb. That night, long after she went to bed, I sat awake rereading Denise's letter. I traced the familiar loops of her handwriting. The ink slightly faded. At the bottom, I noticed something I hadn't before, a faint pencil mark, almost rubbed out, next to the line that mentioned the bank safety deposit box. It looked like an arrow, pointing toward a folded crease. Curious, I held the paper to the light. Inside the fold, almost invisible, were 3 words: "For later, truth." I frowned. I'd gone through that box months ago, every document, every envelope. What truth could be left? The next morning, after Aaliyah left for Savannah to finalize her move, I drove to the bank. The clerk recognized me immediately. "Mr. Carter," she said. "Back to check your box?" "Just one last look," I said. Inside the private booth, I lifted the box onto the table and opened it. The documents were the same: mineral deeds, contracts, old photos. But at the bottom, beneath the thick folder of geological reports, I noticed something new. Or maybe something I'd simply never seen. A small velvet pouch tied with gold string. My breath caught. Inside was a locket. Simple, worn, with the initials DC engraved in looping script. I opened it carefully. On one side was Denise's photo, younger, laughing. On the other side, a piece of folded paper so delicate it looked ready to dissolve. I unfolded it slowly. Denise's handwriting again, smaller this time, hurried but clear. "Isaiah, if you're reading this, you've already proven stronger than I ever imagined. The truth is, the mineral rights were only part of what I wanted you to find. What's beneath this land isn't just wealth, it's history. My grandfather, Samuel Carter, buried something here before the war. Not gold or jewels, but papers, proof of the Carter family's ownership of the entire hollow before it was divided by false claims. He hid it to protect our name when others tried to take it. I couldn't find it, but I believe you can. Follow the ridge past the old well. The oak with 2 trunks guards the rest." I stared at the words until they blurred. Denise had known. All along, she'd known there was more. Not just minerals, legacy. That afternoon, I packed a shovel, flashlight, and the locket, and hiked toward the ridge. The air was cold and sharp, each breath a reminder that I was too old for digging up secrets, but I went anyway. The oak with 2 trunks wasn't hard to find. I'd walked past it hundreds of times without noticing its odd shape. At its base, half buried under roots, was a patch of uneven earth, darker than the rest. I knelt, pressed my palm against the ground, and whispered, "All right, baby, let's see what you left behind." It took an hour of slow digging before my shovel hit something solid, wood, old and rotted. I brushed away the dirt until the outline of a small chest appeared. It wasn't much bigger than a toolbox, bound with rusted metal hinges. Inside, wrapped in waxcloth, were brittle documents, ledgers, maps, and one thick parchment stamped with an 1800 state seal. The title at the top read, Carter Family Land Deed, 1843. My heart thudded. I skimmed the words, barely breathing. The deed wasn't just for my 10-acre plot. It described all of Pine Hollow Valley, nearly 200 acres stretching from the creek to the ridgeline. Property that, according to local maps, belonged to Magnolia Ridge Mining Company. I leaned back against the oak, stunned. The truth Denise had spoken of wasn't symbolic, it was legal. Her grandfather had owned this entire stretch long before any modern claim, and those rights had never been properly revoked. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the papers, cross-checking every signature and seal. It was authentic. Peterson would confirm that in a heartbeat. The implications were staggering. The company I just partnered with didn't own most of the land they were mining. I did. But before I could even call him, headlights cut across the yard. A truck pulled up, tires crunching gravel. Yvette stepped out, her expression serious. "Evening, Mr. Carter," she said, her breath fogging in the cold. "Sorry to come unannounced. We had an issue at the site today, something you should see." I folded the papers quickly, sliding them into an envelope. "What kind of issue?" She hesitated. One of the drillers hit something unexpected. Not rock, not or wood. Like an old structure buried deep. The machinery jammed. "We think it's some kind of underground chamber." My blood ran cold. She went on. "It's directly under your ridge line. The engineers want permission to dig it out. But I thought you want to look first." I grabbed my coat. "Show me." The site was eerily quiet when we arrived. Floodlights cast long shadows across the equipment. At the center of the pit was a gaping hole, edges supported by steel frames. Workers stood in clusters, whispering. When I peered down, I saw it. A dark shape, half buried, carved beams forming what looked like a sealed entrance. "What is that?" I asked. Yvette shook her head. "We don't know yet. Could be old mining tunnels. Could be something else." Something inside me stirred, an instinct deeper than reason. I reached into my pocket and touched the locket. "No," I said quietly. "It's something else." The men turned toward me, confused. "Seal the site for now," I told Yvette. "No one touches it till I say so." She frowned. "You think it's dangerous?" I met her eyes. "I think it's ours." That night, back at the cabin, I placed the old deed beside Denise's letter. The pieces were aligning in ways I couldn't yet name. Whatever was buried beneath Pine Hollow hadn't just belonged to history. It belonged to us. And I had a feeling the truth my wife wanted me to find was only beginning to show itself. I didn't sleep that night. The discovery churned in my mind like a storm that wouldn't quiet. Denise's words, "Follow the ridge, the oak with two trunks," echoed over and over until they felt like prophecy. That box, the deed, the underground chamber, it all connected somehow. But what was she trying to tell me? By dawn, I was dressed, coffee in hand, sitting at the table covered with maps and papers. The early light fell across the old parchment like gold. The deed was dated 1843, signed by Samuel Carter, Denise's great-grandfather, and witnessed by two county officials long dead. Its seal bore the emblem of the Georgia Land Commission, faded but authentic. Peterson arrived just after 8, looking more curious than alarmed. "You sounded urgent on the phone," he said, setting down his briefcase. "What's this about an old deed?" I handed it to him without a word. He unfolded it carefully, adjusting his glasses. "Good Lord," he murmured after a moment. "Where'd you find this?" "Buried near the ridge," I said. "Denise led me to it, said it held the truth." He read in silence for several minutes, his brows knitting tighter. Finally, he looked up. "Isaiah, if this document's legitimate, and I believe it is, it changes everything. This isn't just your 10-acre parcel. This covers the entire valley. The land Magnolia Ridge is mining sits squarely inside the original Carter property lines." I exhaled slowly. "So they're digging on my family's land." He nodded. "And if those mineral rights were never legally sold or transferred, you may own more than they do. Much more." The room went quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock. I could feel Denise's presence, steady and calm, like she was sitting right beside me. Peterson finally spoke again. "We'll need to verify this through the county archives. If we can trace a clean chain of ownership from Samuel Carter to you, Magnolia Ridge will owe you a fortune in back royalties and possibly control over their current operation." I rubbed my temples. "That's not what I want, Peterson. I just want what's right. Denise never wanted this land torn apart. She wanted it protected." He nodded thoughtfully. "Then maybe that's the leverage you'll use, not for money, but preservation." Before I could respond, the phone rang. It was Yvette. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice taut, "you'd better get down here. We cleared part of the debris from that underground structure. You'll want to see this yourself." Peterson and I drove straight to the site. The winter sun was bright but cold, the air sharp enough to sting the lungs. The dig site was now fenced off, security guards stationed at every corner. Yvette met us at the gate, her face pale. "Something's not right," she said quietly. "Come look." She led us to the pit, now reinforced with scaffolding. Below, the dark-wood shape I'd seen before had been partly uncovered. Workers had brushed away layers of clay and silt, revealing carved markings along the beams, symbols, initials, and dates scorched into the wood. "That's old timber," Peterson said, peering down. "Pre-Civil War, maybe earlier." Yvette handed me a flashlight. We opened part of it carefully. There's a chamber inside, a single room. Looks like someone built it to hide things. My hands trembled slightly as I climbed down the ladder. Inside the opening, the air was cool and stale, heavy with the scent of earth and time. The chamber was no bigger than a small cellar, its walls braced with oak beams darkened by age. In one corner stood a wooden crate, half buried in dirt, its lid sealed with iron nails. The beam of my flashlight trembled as I approached. The wood crumbled easily under my fingers. Inside were bundles of papers, tied with twine and wrapped in oiled cloth. I unwrapped the first one. It was a letter, dated 1862. "To my kin who may one day find this. The war has taken everything. They say our name will be erased, our land claimed by those who wear power like armor. But I will not let that happen. Here I leave the truth of our rights, the documents they tried to burn. May whoever finds this remember that Carter land belongs to Carter hands." It was signed Samuel Carter. I felt my knees weaken. Denise had been right all along. Her family had buried the proof of their legacy, and fate had hidden it until the right moment. Peterson knelt beside me, reading over my shoulder. "Isaiah, this is history. Do you understand what this means? These papers could legally restore your family's claim, not just for the mine, but for generations of stolen land." Yvette spoke softly behind us. "Mr. Carter, we'll halt all digging until you decide how to proceed. Magnolia Ridge will need to see this." I stood in the middle of that earthen tomb, the weight of time pressing down. "No," I said finally. "They'll see it when it's ready, not before." That evening, after the site was sealed again, I drove home in silence. Peterson promised to have the documents analyzed and authenticated by historians. I trusted him, but I also felt something stirring deeper than law or ownership. This wasn't just about paper or money. It was about reclamation. When I got back to the cabin, Aaliyah's car was already in the drive. She stood on the porch, bundled in her coat, her expression anxious. "I heard about the dig," she said as soon as I stepped out of the truck. "Yvette called me. What's going on, Daddy?" I hesitated, then handed her one of Samuel's letters. She unfolded it carefully, eyes scanning each line. When she finished, she looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is our family, our blood," I said quietly. "Your mama's great-grandfather. He buried the truth, so no one could take it. And now, after all these years, it's come back to us." She sat down on the porch steps, staring into the woods. "It's like Mama knew all along. She led you straight to it." I nodded. She wanted us to understand what real inheritance means. Not money, not houses. Legacy. Aaliyah smiled faintly. "So, what are we going to do with it?" I looked out toward the ridge, where the mine lights still flickered faintly in the distance. "We'll protect it," Maybe build something better here. A sanctuary, a museum, something that honors where we came from and what we endured to keep it. She nodded, her eyes glistening. Mama would love that. Over the next few weeks, the historians confirmed the authenticity of every document. The Georgia Historical Commission even contacted me personally, expressing interest in preserving the site as a cultural landmark. Word spread, and soon newspapers from Atlanta to Charleston ran stories about the Carter Legacy discovery. Magnolia Ridge, to their credit, handled it gracefully. They offered to fund the preservation project and realigned their operations to avoid the historical zone. Yvette became the liaison, working directly with Aaliyah and me. For once, business and history were on the same side. One cold evening in February, we gathered on the ridge under the oak with 2 trunks. A small crowd of locals, journalists, and state officials stood by as the preservation sign was unveiled. The Carter Heritage Site, established 1843, restored 2026. The crowd clapped. Cameras flashed. But for me, it wasn't about the attention, it was about Denise. I felt her everywhere that day. In the wind, in the sunlight cutting through the trees, in the warmth that lingered despite the chill. Aaliyah took my arm and whispered, "You did it, Daddy. You found her truth." I smiled at her, voice low but sure. "No, baby. We did." As the crowd began to disperse, I stayed behind, resting my hand against the rough bark of the twin-trunk oak. "You were right, Denise," I murmured. "All of it. You saw what I couldn't." For a moment, the wind rustled the leaves above, soft as a sigh. I could almost hear her voice in it, calm, proud, eternal. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without dreams. The land was quiet, the future steady, and the ghosts finally at peace. But deep down, I knew one more chapter was still waiting to be written. Spring returned to Pine Hollow slowly that year, soft and deliberate, like the land itself was remembering how to breathe again. The frost melted into the roots, and the forest shimmered with green. Birds came back to nest in the twin-trunk oak, and the sound of running water from the creek carried through the valley like a hymn. It had been 3 months since the unveiling of the Carter Heritage Site, and life had found its rhythm again, steady, honest, peaceful. Magnolia Ridge had officially transferred part of their land back to me and funded a permanent preservation center on the ridge. Aaliyah oversaw the legal agreements herself, making sure every clause reflected integrity and transparency. She'd even written a public statement for the Foundation's website, announcing that all future proceeds from the mine's royalties would be split between environmental restoration and scholarships for women rebuilding their lives. It was the kind of decision that would have made Denise beam. The cabin, once a symbol of exile, had become a living museum of our story. Visitors came on weekends, students, historians, curious travelers. Aaliyah had transformed one of the back rooms into a small exhibition space, filled with framed letters, maps, and photos. The old locket sat in a glass case under soft light. I still wore it sometimes when no one was looking, just to feel Denise close. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch watching the wind ripple across the field, Aaliyah came out carrying a stack of mail. "You got another letter from the State Historical Board," she said, smiling. "They're officially naming you co-curator of the Heritage Site." I chuckled. "Curator, huh? That's a fancy word for old man with too much time." She grinned. "You earned it, Daddy." She sat beside me, folding her legs up on the swing. The sunlight caught her face, and for a moment, she looked so much like Denise that it stole my breath. "How's the foundation doing?" I asked. "Better than I ever imagined," she said proudly. "The first group of women graduates next month. We've helped 15 families find housing and jobs. It's starting to feel like something real, something that'll last." I nodded, letting her words settle. It's funny, ain't it? All this started with loss, with pain. But here we are, turning it into legacy. "Guess Mama knew what she was doing," she said softly. "She always did," I murmured. For a while, we just sat in silence, the swing creaking gently beneath us. Then she turned to me, her voice hesitant. "I've been thinking, Daddy, maybe it's time you move closer to Savannah. The foundation's growing fast, and it'd be good to have you nearby." You shouldn't be out here alone all the time. I smiled, shaking my head. This lands my heartbeat, Lily. I'm not going anywhere. But your life's just getting started. Don't slow down on account of me. She sighed but didn't argue. She'd learned by now that my roots went too deep to transplant. A few weeks later, the foundation held its first official fundraising gala in Savannah. They insisted I attend as guest of honor, though I felt about as comfortable in a tuxedo as a cat in a bathtub. The event was elegant: string music, soft lighting, tables covered in white linen. People came from all over the state, eager to shake my hand and tell me how inspired they were by the story of the Carter family legacy. When Aaliyah took the stage to speak, her voice carried clear and strong through the hall. This foundation was born from loss, she said, but it's grown from love. The love of a woman who believed in patience, and the strength of a man who proved her faith right. My mother taught us that wealth without wisdom is wasted, and my father taught me that real power lies in humility. The crowd rose in applause. I just sat there, swallowing the lump in my throat, whispering under my breath, "You'd be proud of her, Denise. You really would." After the gala, Aaliyah drove me home herself. The road was quiet, lined with blooming dogwoods that shimmered in the moonlight. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think Mama's lesson was about money, about learning not to be greedy. But it wasn't, was it?" I shook my head. "No, baby. It was about remembering who you are when the world tries to buy your soul." She nodded, smiling faintly. Then I think I finally learned. We reached the cabin close to midnight. She hugged me at the door, long and tight, and whispered, "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Lily. Go on now, get some rest." After she left, I stood for a while, watching her taillights fade into the trees. The night was cool, peaceful. The stars shimmered like 1,000 tiny promises overhead. I walked down to the ridge, following the familiar path to the Twin Trunk Oak. The preservation lights glowed softly around the excavation site, now covered and sealed, with a bronze plaque set into the ground, dedicated to the Carter family, for their faith in the unseen and their belief that truth buried will always rise again. I traced the engraved letters with my fingertips, the metal cold beneath my skin. "I kept my word, baby," I whispered to the night. "The land's safe. Aaliyah's found her way. You can rest easy now." A breeze swept through the trees, rustling the leaves like an answer. The next morning, I woke early and brewed coffee on the porch, the scent mingling with the dew. Aaliyah called to say she'd made it back to Savannah safely and wanted to bring the first group of scholarship recipients up to Pine Hollow for a tour. They should see where it all started, she said. "You bring them anytime," I told her. The door's open. After hanging up, I sat there a long while, listening to the forest breathe. The cabin creaked softly, the wood expanding with the warmth of day. Every sound felt alive: the hum of bees, the rustle of squirrels, the faint clang of miners working far down the valley. Life, in all its ordinary grace, was moving forward. As the sun rose higher, I opened Denise's old Bible, still sitting on the windowsill where she'd left it years ago. Inside the back cover, beneath her handwriting, was a single verse she'd underlined long ago. "And they shall rebuild the old ruins. They shall raise up the former desolations, and they shall repair the ruined cities." I smiled. That was her all over, always speaking in symbols, always a step ahead. By afternoon, I took a slow walk to the creek. The water ran clear over smooth stones, catching sunlight in glints of silver. I sat on a fallen log, feeling the steady pulse of the earth beneath me. Everything that had been broken was mending, slowly, imperfectly, beautifully. That evening, as twilight spread over Pine Hollow, I stood once more on the porch, watching the horizon burn with orange and violet. I thought about my journey, the loss, the exile, the discovery, the forgiveness. I thought about Denise's plan, about Aaliyah's transformation, about the strange, graceful way the world has of making things right when you least expect it. And I realized something. The cabin, the mind, the deed, the foundation, they weren't the real inheritance. The real inheritance was the resilience Denise had planted in us, the courage to fall apart and start again. I lifted my cup in a quiet toast to the fading sun. Here's to you, baby. Here's to the Carter blood that don't quit. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of earth and memory. I closed my eyes and smiled, knowing that somewhere beyond that sunset, Denise was smiling too. Her work here finally done. The story that began with loss had ended in grace. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't just feel alive. I felt home.